Oh yeah. How's that? That's a lot better. All right, let's do it. This is my 200th time starting this, and I think I'm just gonna talk and we're just gonna see where it goes, and I'm not gonna stop. So one of my goals for 2021 that I'm looking to get a head start on is doing this, doing a video where I get the chance to talk to you guys, to talk to the camera and practice, just like giving my thoughts about photography or the gear I'm using. I've tried a few times this year, and like all of those videos are just sitting on a hard drive somewhere and they're just like not very good. But I just have to get practicing. So that's my caveat. I'm not very good at this. I'm gonna try to get better. And I thought this is a good chance for me to get a head start on 2021. I wanted to make a video. I've now been using the Nikon Z6 for exactly 1 year. I ordered it last year on Boxing Day, and I've now kind of had a full run, a full cycle with the camera. Now, it's worth absolutely mentioning that 2020 was not the year we thought it would be. I know looking at the year from the beginning, I had almost every gig canceled, every event canceled, most of my weddings were postponed. But then a whole bunch of different content started emerging. And so despite kind of like losing a bunch of stuff and then gaining a bunch of stuff, I actually had a really amazing year in terms of photo and video work, where I actually really got to put the Nikon Z6 to the test. And after spending a year with it, I have some thoughts. I have a lot that I want to say about it. So here's a chance for me to just put this into a video. For anyone who's like thinking about buying into the Nikon Z series, who's thinking about the Z6 specifically, this video is for you, and I hope it helps. So category one I want to talk about is the physical feeling of the camera. Up until this year, I was shooting Nikon DSLR cameras primarily. I had two D750s that were my primary bodies, and then prior to that I had a D5100 and a D3100. So I've sort of been through the gambit of the Nikon series, and just through having friends in the photo world, I've shot on their Canons and Fujis as well. In my personal opinion, that's all it is, personal opinion, the feel of the Z6 is incredible. It beats them all. I love the button layout, I love the responsiveness, I love the menus, just the overall handling of the camera as you're carrying it throughout a job or using it. It's a great camera. I think the system itself, again, as you're holding it and just the positioning of the buttons, it all comes together to be pretty fluid. And I think that's really enhanced by the two function buttons on the front, function 1 and function 2. There's a great channel called the Monochrome Memoirs. It's a smaller channel, but he has a great video about how he set up the function buttons, and specifically how he uses them to sort of navigate the different autofocus functions. And again, if you're just talking about the look and feeling and handling of the camera, those settings are really what made it for me this year, was just kind of building those two function buttons into my muscle memory on a wedding day or event or commercial gig. The actual weight of the camera is an incredible plus. Coming from someone who used to shoot the D750, and I used to have the Sigma Art lineup, which if anyone's ever shot those, are these giant bulky glass lenses. They are incredible quality, but like it's like literally attaching a cinder block to the front of your camera. I cannot tell you how nice it is to have a featherlight camera in your hand that still produces a similar quality. For me, like again, on a long wedding day, or if I'm traveling and I just want to carry it on a single strap with me, it's so nice just to have this compact, lightweight camera that is not a burden and functions just super well. My main setup on this camera for nearly all of my projects, and I say this knowing that this is a bit of a faux pas in the photography world, is I like to shoot the Z6 and I like the 35mm 1.8, and I know the 35mm focal length is a bit of a joke in the pro photo world, but call me a faux pas, call me a cliche, that's my kind of workhorse setup for the majority of things I'm doing. When we travel to Jasper and we're walking around downtown, when I'm doing a commercial event, when I'm at a wedding and I just kind of want a safe lens that I know doesn't put me in a position where I need to like get too far away or get too close, I just find 35mm to be a completely reliable focal length. So that specific workhorse setup has been, and that's what I'm shooting on right now, that has been my bread and butter this year. And again, just if we're talking about the look and feel of that in the hand, it's been amazing. Now my only gripe with the Z series, and this is fixable, and I'll explain that in a second, but mirrorless cameras in general are quite small, and I think Nikon really indexed on trying to make this compact camera. But the downside of that is for me, as someone who has like pretty big hands, my pinky kind of hangs off the bottom of that, and it stops me from really being able to get a firm grip on the camera. Again, if I was holding it, I could show you, and maybe I'll cut in some iPhone footage of it here. But I do find that with the shallowness or the shortness of the camera, my pinky tends to hang off the bottom. Now that is fixed by, I believe it's like a $40 little metal plate that you can screw into the tripod slot, and it just gives you that sort of meatier hand grip. Highly recommend it. Again, for me, with all of the pluses of this camera and just knowing that it's a $40 little fix that gives me that sort of bigger grip on the camera, totally fine. All right, so that was the physical camera. The second category, the thing I want to talk about, is the versatility of the Nikon Z6. Versatility in this camera has to be its main selling point, in my opinion. If you scrolled through my portfolio this year, you would see that I have shot so many different things. I am a generalist freelancer, so I do weddings, I do commercial, I do products, I do photo, I do video. To try to figure out what kind of photographer I am as you scroll my feed, you wouldn't know. I tend to take on all kinds of work. And so for me, having a camera that can handle all that, a camera that performs well in all of those conditions, that's really important to me. And the Z6 this year has not let me down once. For me, going from wedding photography to wedding videography to doing travel promotions, product photography, shooting interviews for CBC, shooting a beer commercial, all of these different things that I've sort of had to bounce between this year, the Z6 just carried me through it. At this price point, and for the sort of ease of use that this camera offers, I'm almost speechless when I like try to tell people about just the performance I've been able to get out of this thing in those different settings. Now, it's worth acknowledging the criticism around the Z series. Specifically, one of the first things you hear come up around the Z series is the lack of lens diversity. It's a fair criticism, and especially prior to this year, I think you were looking at a pretty trim lens lineup, especially looking at kind of like those Pro Series lenses. The current offerings, and again, this is less true now than it was when I bought this camera, but you were looking at a lot of 1.8s. The zoom lenses were all f4s. And so if you were sort of thinking about what this lens looks like in a professional setting, you probably did have some questions around that lens lineup. If you look at the roadmap on Nikon's website around what the future of the Z series looks like, there are some reassuring releases coming up, and even some ones that have come out this year. There's a lot of different 2.8 glass zoom lenses that have come out, the 24-70 in particular, and then the 70-200, which just released this year. I think those are giving people like myself some relief, knowing that those are on the horizon or already available. For me, again, this year, in the content that I was shooting, again, from video to photo to commercial to wedding, all of that different stuff, as like critical as people are, I never felt like the lenses weren't doing what I needed them to do. So between all of that, between having some Z series glass, between adapting my old DSLR lenses, I just haven't felt that shortcoming. And knowing what's coming out ahead, I don't think that's a valid criticism anymore for me. I don't feel it. So yeah, take that for what you will. That's just my own thoughts on it. So if we're talking about versatility, it again would be disingenuous to say that I have been completely happy with this camera and to say that there hasn't been some heartache along the way. The biggest thing that I feel is true about this camera is that the autofocus struggles. That's just true. You're gonna see that criticism in reviews, probably in the comments on videos like this one. People are pretty quick to come at the autofocus system, and it's valid. As someone who has been moving more into video work, especially the autofocus does struggle in certain scenarios, and even ones that I feel like it shouldn't. There have been a few scenarios this year, like filming interviews, for example, or just trying to get like a smooth tracking shot of a product with the camera on a slider, where the autofocus just won't stop hunting, or it'll just randomly lose its grip on whatever it has and again just start like hunting. I don't know what's causing that. I don't know if it's something on my end of the settings. I have done more research than I care to admit to try to find the right settings and use the right autofocusing mode in the right scenario to make sure that doesn't happen. It has cost me some critical shots in scenarios where redos were not possible. So things like weddings, things like interviews in scenarios that were fast moving. I have lost shots because of it. So for me, that is a giant strike against the Z series. It's something that continues to get better. So this year, the newest firmware for the autofocus did come out. It fixed a massive amount of what was wrong with it. And I just have to have faith that those firmware updates will keep coming, as well as the Z6 II or the Z7 II upgrading to one of the Mark II cameras. So yeah, these moments, it is enough for me to sometimes wish that I did go for the R5 or the A7S III. I think the criticism is valid, but if I'm being honest, the beautiful stills that come out of this, the amazing video quality that comes out of it the 90% of the time when it is working, everything else I've talked about so far and I'm about to talk about is worth hunkering down, knowing that that firmware will hopefully bring the autofocus system the rest of the way. But it's just worth mentioning. It is an absolute gripe. All right, so the third thing we're going to talk about is image quality, and I would have to say that's probably the most important thing, right? In a world where these mirrorless cameras, whether it's the R5, it's the A7S III, anything from the Fuji lineup, in a world where they can all sort of create content that looks like this, they can create good video, they can create good photos. It comes down to that image quality. What is that end product after you're done editing? What is that? So let's start with photography. For me, as a primary photo shooter first right now, the quality that this camera produces has never for a second made me wish that I had a different camera. Every time I get to the end post-production time when I'm looking at that footage and I'm editing and playing with those raw shots, I always am just blown away by what's coming out of this camera. And so again, for me, having that feeling when I'm editing, having that confidence when I'm out shooting, knowing that, despite some of the arm wrestling I might have to do, that the end product is beautiful, it's completely worth it to me. So that's photo image quality and my thoughts on it. Videos. So I bought this camera in 2019, not having any video work booked, not really thinking that videos would even be a part of my workflow moving forward. 100% of my business for the last few years up until 2020 had all been photo work. I was not a video guy. As 2020 was sort of coming down, a giant hole emerged in my community where I live in northern BC of people who just needed freelance video work. And a lot of that actually is a result of the pandemic. There was companies that suddenly had to flip over to digital and they needed videos to sort of tell the story of what was happening, or they needed video content to bring their audience sort of into a space where they had been able to like physically occupy before. So a few jobs kind of arrived to me, and then that just started this ball rolling. And the Nikon Z6, because I had it already, I was able to just sort of like naturally transition into that video workflow. The camera just kept up. It was like an unintended consequence of buying this camera at the beginning of the year. In terms of being like a camera for someone like myself to go through some of these early learning mistakes with, it has been an incredibly forgiving camera. The image quality, the IBIS, all of those kind of amateur mistakes that I think people like myself make in the early days of videography, it has had the ability to just sort of carry me through those blunders. I want to summarize by saying that I am just really happy with this camera. This year was a really weird year for me. I wasn't totally sold on the Z series when I first bought it last year, so I actually kept one of my D750s as a sidearm all year. And so in events where I had both cameras, I had a Z6 on the side and a D750 on the side. What am I doing with my arms right now? What is this? And I was often sort of bouncing between them. So I would kind of grab my Z6, grab my D750, and it created a lot of pretty big inconsistencies in my workflow and just in my brain at the time. And over time, I noticed myself really falling in love with that Z6 for like, it's a newer camera, it feels nicer, but just reliably, I knew that it was going to produce a better image every single time. And I just fell in love with it over the course of that year. So for what it's worth, like as of just a few hours ago, I have sort of doubled down on my commitment to the Z series. I have ordered the Nikon Z6 II. It'll be here next week, I hope. Canada Post, please don't lose my package. And yeah, knowing that Nikon continues to improve the things that I have problems with firmware updates, it just makes me believe more and more in the Z lineup. So I think that's it. I have no idea how awkward this ended up being. I have no idea how long it is. I hope that it's still recording. I think it is. If you liked this video, please hit the like button. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. I will try to make more. And if you want to hear some more thoughts on the Z series or whatever, let me know. Cool. Okay. Bye.